All right. Welcome back to the Runners Roundtable podcast. Today, I am talking to Shana of Stiletto Running, and I'm so excited to have you here. Partly because I follow you on Instagram, but partly because your t-shirts always bring a smile to my face. Like just what you wear, every time I see anything of yours pop up in my feed, I'm like, oh, she's having fun. And that's what I want to feel when I'm running. And I'm like, okay, she's having fun. It's a great reminder that while running is hard, it can be fun. So I know you from Instagram. I love your outfit choices all the time, just the color, the saying, and how you celebrate running, the hard parts of running, but also the great parts of running. So before I say anything else, how about you tell all of us a little bit about yourself and your running story?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today. So my running story. So I was not a runner my entire life. I was definitely one of those people that, a lot of people say this, the mile in gym class was torture, hated running growing up, wanted nothing to do with it. I was turning 40. It was a milestone birthday, and I became friendly with a group of girls from my gym that were runners, marathoners, Ironmen, and very inspiring to me. And I thought, you know what, maybe I'll run a half marathon for my 40th birthday. And remember, I'd never run a day in my life. So that's pretty much how it started. I had this bucket list half marathon, turning 40. And I mean, as they say, 11 years later, the rest is history. I mean, I just kept going, fell in love with it.
What was your experience during that first half marathon?
It was the hardest thing I'd ever done at the
Okay.
time. It literally, I mean, exhilarating because even when I crossed the finish line, I still couldn't even call myself a runner. Like it was just, I didn't believe that I had actually been able to do that. And I remember finishing and crying, and I was so proud of myself. And I'm like, I'm never doing that again. It was impossible. Next day, of course, was like, I think I can beat my time. So, signed up for another one. And yeah, it was, I mean, honestly, one of the best days of my running career because it was the first distance race I'd ever done. And then, of course, there were so many more moments like that to come. So,
Yeah. So did you go straight from, all right, I'm turning 40. I want to do something to celebrate. Let me do a half marathon. Or was there a 5K, 10K, anything like that in between? And also, how did you train for that first race?
so I had a good friend that was an Ironman, and so she had done a couple of marathons in addition. And she said to me when I started training, maybe you might want to do a 5K just so you can, see what it feels like to be in a race environment, stand at a start line, cross a finish line. So we did do one 5K together, and it was just part of my training. But that was the only race that I had done leading up to the half marathon. And I followed the Hal Higdon's training plan and was all about just putting in the miles for that race just to get from point A to point B.
Yeah. And how would you say you've evolved as a runner since then?
Oh my gosh.
I'm sure
So
that's like, yeah.
yeah, I mean, like literally life changing. From a mental standpoint, a physical standpoint, um, how I view life. I mean, it changed my life really in so many ways. It opened so many doors, getting involved in the running community, the friendships I've made, being able to create my brand, Stiletto Running, coming from a passion for fashion and my love for running, just was able to combine that to create that brand. It really changed my life.
How many races have you done to date?
So I don't know total for like all the distances, but I know my long distance races. I've done 11 marathons and 44 half marathons.
Yeah, that that's when you know you're hooked. When you
Yeah.
can, I feel like I'm the same where I can't tell you how many 5K races I've done. I know I've done a lot and I'm a lover of spreadsheets, so I have that information, but it's the half marathons and the marathons are the ones that you just always remember. And these are events that they take up so much time, but they also, when you cross that finish line, you remember it. Like those are just moments where you remember. Like I know I won't remember what half marathon number 11 was. I don't remember that. But if I see it, oh, this race from this year, I can kind of remember like, okay, yeah, I know what I was feeling, how that particular experience went. And I love that you can recall that. So what was your most recent race?
Philly Marathon just a few weeks ago.
Ooh, how did that go?
Not so great. It was up there in one of my hardest races, I would say. I was sick all week leading up to it. Just had an awful cold. Wasn't COVID, I tested, but I just felt horrible, just really congested and coughing. And my whole taper week, I mean, I didn't run for 6 days leading up to the
Wow.
so that was the first time that ever happened, because I've always been healthy leading up to a race and getting all the way to the start line with every single workout run that I was planned to do, had done it. So I was a little nervous, but that's where I think the coach and experienced runner came into play, that I know 6 days, I wasn't going to lose any fitness. The training was there. But race day, I still wasn't myself. I was still pretty congested and just kind of tired still. And then the weather, I love cold weather. All of my PRs were in like 30-degree weather. It's my jam.
Yep,
But
I'm with you.
yeah, I've never been so cold. I think if it was a half marathon, I would have been okay. But I think being out there twice as long, I mean, it was like 30 degrees, but with a feels like of like 21, I think.
Oh,
20 to 30-mile-per-hour winds. I was freezing. I couldn't feel my hands, and I had hand warmer, the hotties in my
yeah.
gloves. I had a bathroom stop, which I've never done in my 11 years of racing. Even on training runs, I very rarely have gone to the bathroom, but never in a race. And my stomach was a mess. And I think I was taking so many things during the week with
Yep.
the cold, like Sudafed and Mucinex, and so I just think I just was still not myself. So it wasn't a great race. But I always say crossing a finish line of any race, especially a marathon, is a huge accomplishment. And so for that, I, was proud of myself and proud that I could push through and get to the finish. I mean, it wasn't the, finish time I had hoped for or trained for, but they all don't go as well as you hope. So
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things as being an athlete, particularly with these longer distances, is the feelings after the race. Or,
mhm.
that those feelings of if you're disappointed with how the race went down, no one really talks about that. Or if not, I feel like I hear so much more when people get their PR races or,
Yeah.
they get the times. Like I feel like people are more willing to share about that experience versus when the race doesn't go well. And it just might be the feeds that I follow or the people that I talk to, or it just might be that a reflection of me where I just share so much about running and how I'm doing with running. But I'm like, wait, I would love to hear people speak more to that disappointment of like, okay, so it wasn't this. Yes, crossing the finish line is still an accomplishment, but also I'm a little bit disappointed. And here is like a situation where you did everything, right? You crossed all the T's, you had weeks of training, months of training, and then you get sick. And that is something that totally out of your control. And how has it been for you these past few weeks post race?
Um, yeah, like you said, I mean, I definitely I still crossed the finish line with a smile on my face and was like, okay, you know what? Check. Marathon number 11. Like, how many people can say that? I kept trying to feed the positive into my brain that, I know I'm capable of much more. I've done it before. There'll be another race, and all that comes into play. And then of course the next few days, then I get hard on myself, and like you said, you see people on Instagram that PR, BQ, BQ. I was so sick, but I had a 30-minute PR. And
Oh
so
yeah.
then, okay, like, I don't understand some people. Like, how do you push through a race and still manage to have a really good race when you're, fighting a cold all week, or you threw up 3 times during the marathon? Like, I've heard so many stories like that. So yeah, it definitely makes you compare yourself to others and wonder what you did wrong and what could you have done. And like you saying with your Excel spreadsheets, I almost had to make a list of what could have I done better or could have fixed during the race. And I honestly said I didn't feel well for the entire week leading up to it. I didn't feel great the morning of. I've never been so cold in my life. Weather's something you can't control.
Yep.
And sometimes, like, it's your day and sometimes it's not. And I wasn't my day. So and it definitely, I feel like over the years there are probably more races that didn't go as much as or as well as I had hoped than the great races. And I think that's what makes us keep coming back for more, because I always try to say this to myself: for every bad race or every bad workout, there's always a great one on the horizon. And I do feel that way because it took me many years to get to a new PR in the marathon or the half marathon. And if you don't keep showing up, you're not going to get there. And I think a lot of people give up before they can get to that point. So I do think you just need to keep showing up and chipping away. And I think that's what makes this sport so amazing, because you never know your potential unless you can stick with it.
Yeah. It's like, I think of myself where I'm not too far behind you, but I ran nine marathons and I did 150K. And that 50K was, I just wanted to see if I could do it. It wasn't even for time. It was just pure curiosity of, can I train to accomplish something like that? Because even now, having ran 9 marathons, that one ultra, anything over 15 miles freaks me out. Like in training runs, anything over 15 miles, it's uncharted territory. So for me, when I was prepping for that 50K, it was really just about like, can I do that up here? Can I get my brain to wherever it needs to be to do that? And I love what you said of, for every bad race, there's always a great one on the horizon. And I said race, I know you added in workouts because that's part of it too. I think of like, oh, I haven't had a PR in any distance since maybe 2016. Like it's been a while. And there's definitely those moments where I feel bad about myself or I get down on myself because I'm like, wait, but I'm doing all the things and doing the strength training, I'm doing the speed workouts and I'm stretching and, I'm trying to get my work on my brain and, figure out the psychology behind it, how do I feel on race day and how do you handle the nerves? And there are days where that chatter gets really, really loud. And then there are days where I'm like, you know what, this is just the season that I'm in. And also the longer, at least for me, the longer I've been in this sport, the easier it's been for me to kind of not put so much weight on the numbers per se. And I look back on what you just said of like, can I keep coming back for those great workouts, for that great potential, right? Like I hear you and I'm like, oh, you're talking about the potential there. And that's where I'm at, where it's like, can I keep doing this because greatness might be there? And to
Mhm.
me, that again, like that says more than the finish times, more than the split times, even though that stuff, I still want that stuff, but I'm more curious about that. And I think, I don't know if that's just more of that, the mental side of running, of being in this sport for a long time is not only keeping yourself physically well, but also engaging in those practices that keep you mentally well as well.
Right. Oh, the mental, I truly believe when people say running long distance is 90% physical, or sorry, 10% physical, 90% mental. And I
Yep.
really do that. My husband will say to me, sometimes you make Xanax nervous. Like I am an anxious person and I'm a perfectionist. So I have a really hard time at standing at the start line. My race anxiety is horrible. And so I, like you said, it gets louder and louder, the voices in your head. And um that's always been my biggest challenge over the last 11 years, trying to put that to bay and really just going out there and just seeing what I can do on any given day. Um, I do think I lost my train of thought. No, but that mental chatter, it certainly can take over. And what I was saying before about reaching your potential, and if you don't show up and you don't continue, how will you ever know your greatness? Like you said, and I don't want to regret taking 6 months off from running or deciding, you know what, I'm throwing in the towel because that race didn't go the way I wanted it to, and just giving up. Because if I did, how will I ever know? And I always have this other, thing that I always wonder what if about so many things, just not even running, just everything. And so I kind of put that into running and wonder what if I did stop and didn't keep trying to see what I can do, I'll never know. So I might as well keep trying and keep showing up. And if there's another PR, that would be amazing. And if there isn't, you know what? I'm going out there and I'm doing something that I love, and it keeps me healthy, it keeps me fit, keeps my mind in check.
Yeah.
So, for that, I'll just keep going and see what happens.
I love that. And again, I love that so much because it truly speaks to the season of running where I'm in. Where, when I first started running, it was because I just wanted to see what I could do. That I was like,
Mhm.
you have like that initial curiosity. And I try to explain this to people too, that, when you're new to the sport, you're going to see those PRs come more quickly because the more you learn, and the more you implement, the more you see the results of that, right? So like I I have when I first started running, I would run with it was like a duffel bag on my, like one of those drawstring bags on
Oh
my
yeah.
back. I would take a full size water bottle with me, the keys, and I would run. And, I'm running with people who are a little more seasoned than I was. And they're like, why do you have that? And I'm like, well, how else do you carry stuff when you run? Right. And it wasn't until the run club that I was a part of, they had this one session with a local running store. Like it was a collaboration. And they came out and they're like, these are running belts and this and shorts with pockets. And I was like, wait, what? All this stuff exists, right? So it's that like, oh, running got significantly better after that because now I didn't have something on my shoulders. I wasn't carrying a full size water bottle. I had my little handheld. I planned routes around, like little
Yeah.
things like that in the beginning of running. That just translates to big improvements
Mhm.
very quickly. And that's why I just appreciate so much what you're sharing here, because there does come a point where I feel like, at least in my experience with running, is that there's a lot of highs, there's a lot of lows, and then there's a lot of long plateaus as well. And it's in those plateaus that you have to figure out, like, okay, what do I need to start changing now? What worked for me 5 years ago doesn't work for me anymore. And I have to be curious to, curious to kind of explore what else can be done. So it's just this of like this idea of just keep showing up and be open to possibility, but also that possibility means you have to also be open to kind of questioning yourself and how you're even showing up to the process of running.
Right.
So I just love that so much. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I try to tell people, and I tell people what you said all the time, that running is 90% mental, 10% physical, because it is there is a whole transformation that you need to go through in your mind to make running any distance possible, and to make it possible for the long term.
Definitely.
Yeah. So how did you get into coaching?
So, in 2018, I actually hired a coach for myself. I had a surgery and had an injury, and basically was like kind of out of running for about 18 months.
Oh,
Back and forth, and like 2 months off, a month of running, 3 months off, like it just between the injury and the surgery. So, when I finally was cleared to start running again, I was like, something needs to change, because like you said, I was stuck in a plateau with race times, and I didn't know why. And I thought, you know what? I need someone to hold me accountable. I need a real training plan or something. Nothing was working. So I hired a coach, and I mean, within 6 months, I was setting PRs that I hadn't set in like 3 years. So I was like, okay, something is working. So after working with her for a couple of years, then the pandemic happened in 2020. And, we're all sitting at home, and I'm still going out and running, and I'm really happy with where I was with my running and my achievements at that point, working with a coach. And I was like, you know what? I'm sitting home with not a hell of a lot going on right now. I think I'm going to get certified. So that's when I ended up getting my RRCA certification. They were doing all their courses online, and it was like the perfect timing to do it. So yeah, so 2020 is when I got certified and started kind of putting it out there, for, to start coaching people and kind of give back what I had taken in for a couple of years, and just with my own experience, with running and with having a coach.
Yeah, I love it, because we don't even consider how important those mentorship relationships are within running. Whether it's, like you said, there was a group of people who were Ironman, and like that's a mentorship relationship there too, of like someone kind of maybe not in an official coaching capacity, but definitely coaching you along the way. And here it's the same thing of, you had a run coach, and that run coach just opened up your mind to the possibility of it. And again, that same like mentorship of, okay, let's give this a try. So how has coaching been going for you since you became certified?
It's been good. So I'd say it's really, for the first 6 months to a year, I wasn't doing much with it. So it's been about a year that I've taken on athletes, and I love it. I mean, even before I was certified, and I'd have people that knew me or friends that are not runners, ask me for tips or whatever, just being an experienced runner. And I mean, I love helping people. Like when someone tells me, oh, I want to run, how do I get started? What do I do? Like I get giddy. I get so excited, because I know how much it has changed my life, and how much I've grown in love with the sport. And I want other people to feel that too. So, so with coaching over the last year or so, I get so excited to help someone, whether they're a beginner, literally just learning how to run. I just trained someone for their first 5K, like they weren't a runner at all. And that's so rewarding. I love that, you know? And then with other distance runners, I have a couple of people right now training for their first marathon. So I love that. Like, it's right. Like I feel like every distance gives you this like amazing feeling to help someone achieve a goal that they never would think that they would ever be able to achieve. So I'm really excited for these two. They're best friends and they're running their first marathon. So I love that. I get weepy-eyed thinking about them crossing the finish line already, and they're just so excited. So yeah, I love helping people, and I think that's like my favorite part about it.
It really is. And it's so funny that you bring up the whole, you've been coaching before you were officially, right? Like quote unquote, officially a coach, right? Because
Right.
You have people, and that would happen to me all the time, where I would get these questions and I'm like, okay, I mean, you can Google that, but sure, I can tell you,
Right.
I can tell you too. And it was kind of similar for me, where I was like, well, you know what? I'm gonna get this certification so that I could feel official. Like
Mhm.
people are already asking me these questions, but now I'm gonna feel official doing it. And before that, I've read all the books, and like I have my little library here with all my running books. And I'm like, I was just such a lover of the sport that I was like, all right, let's make it. I felt like that was almost like getting married to the sport, where I was like, okay, we're going to make this official. I'm going to do this run coaching certification, and I'm going to be official. So when you come and ask me a question, I really know what I'm talking about, even though, you know what you're talking about the whole time, but that does open up a different avenue, or at least for me, like a different avenue for understanding the process of running. Because here you're building off of your years of experience of embodying what it means to be an athlete, to being coached. And then you add just the formality, right? It's more of like the cherry on top. Like you already know. So
Right.
how has that been, just when you're thinking about working with your athletes? How do you coach them? Or I guess maybe the question I can ask now is just, all right, I'm an athlete and I'm interested in learning about working with you as a coach. What is that process like? And how do I sign up to be one of your athletes?
So I mean, gosh, I mean, there are so many questions, and I find like I have a list of questions that I ask, but then even once I start working on the training plan, I still have more questions as I start to learn about the person. I mean, initial questions would, be, are you a new runner? Or if you've already been running, how long have you been running? What race distances have you run? What are your different race times, PRs? How many days a week do you run? What is your current training pace that you go out for all of your runs? Do you incorporate speed work or tempos? Oh gosh, I just have such a laundry list. I mean, really, I want to know what their goals are, where they are right now, and what their ultimate goal would be. So whether they're training for a half marathon right now with me, but are they ultimately going to want to train for a marathon? I just, want to see where their head is at with their goals. And initially I would have them do a time trial, like a 2-mile time trial, just so I can really get an idea, because I've had people come to me and say, okay, well, my PR in the half marathon is whatever, XYZ. And then I'm like, okay, well, when is that PR from? Oh, 6 years ago. Okay, well, that's great, but I need to see where you are right now today and what you're capable of. And then I'll adjust the training plans based on that time trial and as we go along, because what someone might do in a time trial today, 6 weeks from now, they might be back where they were at that PR distance 6 years ago. It just, they needed to get out there and really start running and get involved with speed work again, or, you know, things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing too, where it's, and I, again, I try to explain this to people, and I'm sure you explain this to people too, where it's like, as a run coach, you need to understand the full picture. You're not hiring a run coach just to get a plan. Like, you're hiring them to you. And in hearing the way you described it, it's like, oh, you as the run coach, you're the bridge between what was and what will be. And that's you with the workouts, with the coaching, bringing them together. And and it's, I laugh too, because you're like 6 years ago, and I'm like, yeah, 6 years ago was when I ran my marathon PR. And I think of that, and I'm like, that's totally a different athlete right now. I'm not going to look at those numbers. So I appreciate that you have them do a time trial, because that gives you real data from today versus, oh, and I think, and I guess we can kind of like discuss the merits of this, but I'm like, even a PR from a year ago, I don't even know if I would trust something like that, because it's like, okay, but what's happened from that PR to now? What's been the intensity of your training? Are you still doing your speed workouts? Are you resting? How is life? Like, there's so much more that comes into the picture than just, if I were to say, hey, Shana, I want to run a marathon, and I want to do a 3:45. And it's like, okay, that's great, but is it actually possible where you're at right now to build the fitness or fine tune the fitness to get you to that point? Maybe, but also if you don't have like the data from today, or even just, a collection of runs, it's really hard to create that for them. So I'm curious how you have these conversations with your athletes, in terms of like, let's say they do their time trial and you're like, based on this time trial, I don't think that goal is the best goal for you right now, because that's also part of the coaching relationship, is having these tough conversations. So how do you have that conversation with an athlete?
So I have to say, I haven't encountered that yet as a new coach. I think for the most part, any of the athletes I've been coaching are pretty in tune to where they're at. But I have had to make adjustments in people's plans and say, I think your thoughts are a little aggressive. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, or maybe it's the people that I've been coaching, but they're pretty accepting of taking advice from someone that has experience. And so I think, in the long run, I think they know it will benefit them to listen to someone with experience. I have had a couple of people where I have put in plans and they just, I don't know what they're doing. But you put in paces that you think they're capable of, and they're just going haywire and running whatever they want to do. And so in that sense, I'm like, I don't know why you're working with a coach if you're doing your own thing. So I don't know that I've really had to have that conversation with an athlete yet.
How have those conversations gone, though? The ones of like, okay, here's the plan, but you're doing your own thing. Because I find that's definitely something that happens quite frequently. I have been guilty of doing that as well. Like, there are days, and I always say this, I'm like, I love running with my friends, but sometimes running with my friends, I'm like, okay, yeah, I get really excited, or I do something else. So how does that conversation go for you all, or how do you approach something like that? Because that's one of the things that I find the most fascinating about these coaching relationships, because it is a relationship, and sometimes in relationships you have to have tough conversations.
Right. Now, I think communication is so important. I've had to say, if you and nicely, I'm not mean about it. Um, if you keep running your workouts too fast or faster than prescribed paces, it will get to a point that you'll either A, get injured, B, burn out, or C, quit. Like you just won't want to show up anymore. So I definitely instill the less is more sometimes, where
Mhm.
you really slow down, and every workout has a purpose. So if I'm putting this pace in a speed workout this week, you need to stick to that, because next week or in 3 weeks, as the plan starts building, paces are going to pick up even more, and there'll be more mileage, and you don't want to get injured, and you don't want to be so tired that you can't complete the workouts that I'm giving to you. So, I try to not put a spin, but try to make them see the future of the plan, where the plan is going,
Mhm.
because it does get harder as you get into the nitty gritty of, long distance marathon training. And if you're not sticking to what you're supposed to do now, you might have a problem later down the road. Some people listen and some don't. And there's so much you can control as a coach. You want to give them or set them up for the best race day possible. But like, I think anything in life, like you have to follow rules sometimes, or it's going to
Right.
come back to haunt you. So
Yeah. Yeah. And do you find that that happens most frequently with the speed workouts or with easy runs?
a little bit of both, but I would say more so easy runs.
Yeah.
People definitely, and it took me a long time to realize that the slower the better on the easy runs, for myself, not even just for coaching. Um, but yeah, I do see people going too fast on easy runs. That's for sure. And when I always say, I don't like to compare myself to other runners, and nor should
Mhm.
other runners compare themselves to me. You don't know where anyone is in their running history. So when you see someone going out there and running this amazing, whatever, 3:15 marathon, but you don't know how long they've been running. You don't know their background. You don't. So when I'm telling people to slow down on their easy runs, I will compare and say, just an FYI, these are my race times. This is what I do on my easy runs, to show that, you know what, I can still run this half marathon time, and I'm going this much slower on my easy runs. So if your race times are slower than mine, you should not be running your easy runs faster than me.
Faster.
So in that sense, comparison is a good thing, because you want people to see, like, for example, I'm still training with my coach. I mean, she just ran like a 2:59 marathon. Her easy runs are like 10:30s. So if she's running 10:30s on her easy runs, and I'm no way near a 3-hour marathon, my easy runs should be even slower. And which also leads me to say, it's not just pace, it's easy as an effort as well. And so
Yes.
there are some days where, technically my easy pace range should be here. I'm running so much slower because I want to be able to get to that next workout. And so I'm still working on going even slower on my easy days. That's like my new thing for this next training cycle for me. So I really try to instill that in my athletes for sure.
And I love that you do that, because I find that sometimes we think that there's like a hierarchy between coach and athlete. So doing that, you're like, no, 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 I'm right here with you. I'm struggling in the same way that you're struggling with these paces. And yet I'm pushing myself to set myself up how I need to set myself up. And that is one of the hardest things. And we have both been runners for a very similar amount of time. And I
Mhm.
remember when I first started running, I'm sure it was the same for you. all I ever heard was, if you want to run fast, you've got to run fast. Right.
Yeah.
So like as a coach, you're also having to deprogram people from that mentality. And it takes a lot of effort to be able to go out on that run. Like I've realized once I jumped on the bandwagon of, I've got to slow down, I've got to, watch, I try to feel my pace. And then also like, okay, is my heart rate kind of in there? Is this pace range within where I think easy is? And even then that changes day by day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
It really did take a while for me to be okay with that, because those easy runs, they feel so much harder. And the reason they feel so much harder is because they require, at least for me, so much more control. Like I actually have to, I feel like sometimes I'm holding myself back because, if the weather is nice outside, I'm like, oh, I want to go. And it's like, no, remember, like, we're going easy, but I think it's also great, the relatability of you saying, okay, this is where I'm at. And I find that it's not even a comparison. It's more like a challenge. Like you're challenging your athletes to, wait a minute, if my coach is doing this and then she's racing this, and this is the person that I'm trusting with my training, let me pause. Let me pause for a moment and let her words sink in, because yes, we can easily, I mean, I've done it before. Everyone does it. You can easily fall down that comparison rabbit hole when it's a person you don't know. Going back to your point of like, yeah, that 3:15 marathoner, you have no clue what their life is like. You have no clue how long they've been running. You have no clue what workouts they've done. You have no clue at all. But your coach, they know what you've been through. And there's also that you're a source of support as well. So I think it's like you can challenge, but you're challenging because and at the same time, there's also this dynamic in the relationship where it's like, okay, but you've been hired because your opinion is trusted. So if you trust me, let's have this discussion right now, because what's going on here? And I think, or when you give your athletes the plan, how do you give it to them? Is it in week chunks? Is it an entire training cycle? Is it a month? How do you present the plan to them?
I do month by month. And I do, so like after, I check in pretty much after every workout. But after like a couple of weeks, if I see that they're not hitting paces on a speed workout or a tempo run, I might adjust it a little bit, because especially, the first month, because I don't want to burn them out for, the months to come for, a marathon distance, where you're training for 16 weeks or so. So yeah, I think the month works well. I think anything longer than that is just too much, and you can't adjust it, or you can adjust it, but I think it's overwhelming for an athlete to look at something so far out, especially someone that is about to run a new distance for themselves. If I looked ahead at like month 3 for a marathon, it was my first marathon, and saw the 16, the 18 milers, I don't know that I would want to keep going. I think I would. So yeah, I think a month is a good chunk to give at a time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I trained myself, and I'm looking over here because I'm looking at the books that I used to train myself. And when I trained myself, so when I first started running, it was very much so I would find training plans online. I had the books, and I love it. I still do it now for like reference points, because I'm so curious to see how these training plans have evolved as research has evolved, as like the trends in running have evolved. And I remember training myself and seeing the entire plan, and I would print it out and like highlight each week when I finished it. But yes, seeing that was so intimidating, because I'm like, oh my goodness, how am I supposed to get like I know now I know that within a marathon training cycle, obviously there's going to be, your 18 miler, 16 miler. So you're going to have those runs, but there's something very mentally different about knowing that there's somewhere in the future versus seeing it on a paper and being like, okay, so the week of February 2nd is that week, right? Like that is so far away. That's going to totally take you out of the workout or the work that you have to do now. And so to me, it's funny to reflect on how running has changed and how our relationship to running has changed over the years. But how would you describe your coaching style?
I'm very, and I guess I can't say hands-on because like all my athletes are virtual. I haven't coached anyone in person. It's everyone's, all over the country. But hands-on in the sense that I'm all about communication. Like I want to know, how did you feel after that workout? Did it feel too easy? Did it feel too hard? Is there anything I'll ask them, is there anything that you thought would be different about this workout? I kind of want to challenge them to say, what was it that you liked? What was it that you didn't like? Almost because I want to find not a weakness, but I know I can't stand tempo runs. I can't stand them. And that is the bread and butter of marathon training. I don't know why, I just find them so hard. Like I would rather go out and do 20 intervals fast than do, I don't know, 6 miles at, half marathon pace. It's just so hard. And then always makes you question, how did I do that during a race? Because,
yeah,
because I always feel harder in training. I don't know why, but, oh my God. Now I lost my train of thought.
Yeah,
again.
no. So you asked them what worked, what didn't work, like what they liked, what could have gone better.
Right. So their weaknesses, I want to know what workouts they don't like, because not that I want to keep giving it to them to make them angry, but I feel like those are the workouts that will challenge somebody and almost make them a stronger runner, because I find maybe not that I don't push myself on a tempo run, but I tend to, and I don't want to say give up either, but because it's my least favorite, I get the most anxious about it. Maybe I don't give it what I should be giving it because I dread it, because they're hard. And so I think learning how to get out of your comfort zone is huge. And so that's why I kind of like to know what might be the workouts that they like the least, because I think it can only benefit you in the long run. Haha, long run. Really, no pun intended. That just came up.
But it's perfectly placed. Yeah. So here's something that in all these conversations that I'm having, I'm like, okay, and I know themes are going to come up, right? Like you talk to enough people, you talk to enough runners, we all kind of have the same curiosities. Mm-hmm. And what I'm realizing more and more with each conversation that I have is how important your coach is to your mental game. And that right there, I'm like, that's it. That's what you're doing. It's not so much, and again, going back to that whole 90-10 idea, mm-hmm. It's once you find out what's the workout that challenges your athlete the most, it sucks, but hey, you're going to see that workout a lot more throughout the training cycle, because ultimately what you're prepping your athlete for is race day. Mm-hmm. And if you can, I always say it for myself, I'm like, if I can survive anything during training, I'm really confident that I can make it through race day. And that's what I'm hearing from you, where it's like, okay, let's find out where this quote unquote weakness is, because that weakness is going to become your greatest strength.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing from you. And I'm like, oh yeah. And you said tempo, and I'm like, I'm the same. Whenever I see kilometer repeats, that's the one that I'm like, ugh, like I get so grumpy with
Yeah.
Because I'm like, these are just awful because it's not too long, but it's not short, but it's just enough that you feel it. And anytime I see that in any training cycle, and again, I'm like, it's similar, like a tempo, where you're like, okay, that is something that's really important for these longer distances when
Yeah.
you're training for those longer distances. But when you finish it, definitely what happens in your head is usually, or at least for me, I'm like, oh, wow, that really sucked, but I did it. And now I'm on top of the world. Like, here's
Yes.
this thing that I didn't like, but I still did it. And I think but that also goes back to what you were saying of helping your athletes understand, like, okay, there's a purpose to this. You're
Mm-hmm.
not doing anything to punish them. It's
Right.
really, there's a reason behind these workouts.
Mm.
So how does that feedback process work? Are people texting you? Are they emailing you? Are you reaching out to them? Or is it like through a platform where people can leave comments? How does that work?
Yeah. So I'd say a little bit of both, email and through the training platform that I use. Yeah. That's a lot of where my communication happens with them.
Yeah, because you get all the data there. But that's also, and that's something too with these coaching relationships, is you as a coach have to cultivate that as
Mhm.
well, of like, all right, we're going to communicate a lot. I tell people all the time, I'm like, I like communication. There's no such thing as over communication with me. Like, just
Right.
send me an email, send me a text, like wherever it is, because it's in order for you to be effective in helping these athletes reach their goals, they've got to communicate with you and they've got
Yeah.
to let you know, like, truly what's working. Although now I'm like, if your athletes listen to this, they're going to be like, let me make sure I don't grumble too much about workouts because then she's going to give me more.
So true.
They're going to be like, now I know her secret. Yeah.
Right.
How would you describe your coaching philosophy?
Um, I feel like anyone can benefit from a coach. I feel like there's, so many people that just think coaches are for the elite runners. I think a coach is for anyone. Anyone that wants accountability, wants a cheerleader, other than your family who might be sick of hearing about your races, or friends that don't run, someone that's on the same page as you, and gets it, you know. Um, and I think a coach can help you believe in yourself, where we were talking about the 90-10. I think the coach knows, your running capabilities. They see it. I was going to say on paper, but in an app, they see, they see what you're capable of. Whereas, everybody that follows you on social media, or you follow, you don't know what, like you said before, you don't know what they're doing on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, how long they've been running. Your coach knows this, they see this. And to have someone that knows what you're capable of is huge. So I think a coach is for anyone. I mean, that's really my philosophy on coaching, for sure.
Yeah. And that leads to the question that I always like to ask is, how can we make running more accessible?
I think with social media being so big right now, I think, so much of what we see on social media, like we were talking about before, is all the PRs and the BQs and oh, I ran 25 marathons this year. So like all of those things that you see and hear, I think we need to change the stigma of what everyone thinks a runner should be, and how running is accessible for everybody, because you don't need to be fast. You don't need to be elite. You don't need to run a marathon. If you want to only run 5Ks, you can run 5Ks. Me personally, I don't like 5Ks. They make me want to puke. But but that's because I go out and I want to run, But if someone just wants to run short distance, like, anybody can run, and anybody can run any distance that you want. So I think we need to change that stigma. And I think more people would like to become a runner. I think they're afraid of what other people will think of them running on the roads. I've heard from people say, oh, well, I don't want to run on a main road because I don't want anyone to see me. Well, who cares? So I think that's where the stereotype runner needs to go away. And I think more people need to talk about the runners that come in all shapes and sizes and don't run fast all the time and may do run walk intervals. It doesn't make you any less of a runner. So I do think things like that will make running more accessible for people.
Yeah, I agree. I find that, I started running and sharing my running story on Instagram. So I feel like I grew up as a runner with Instagram. And even now, when I kind of reflect back as to how the running community kind of shows up on Instagram, it's like you have two camps. You've got the one camp, which are the super fast runners that like have massive followings. And then you have the other camp, similarly have massive followings, but they're, quote unquote, slow runners, or they're not your typical runner. They're not elite runners. And I'm like, okay, I love that we have these two, like benchmarks or goalposts on either side. But I'm like, we're missing the story of all the people in between. And if you're not seeing all the people in between, you're thinking, oh, I either have to be kind of elite, really, really fast, or I have to fall in this other camp of people who run and are runners, but they're the opposite of the elite people. And I find that that's been, again, really fascinating to kind of observe on social media, because you have all these people, to your point, you have the people who are run walkers, you have people who, and I've heard this too, where it's like, oh, I'm not a runner, I don't do marathons. And I'm like, what? No, what are you even saying? Like, no one said you had to do a marathon. There's this whole, one of my friends, she introduced me to this idea of like the relationship escalator. And I'm like, oh, it's the same thing with running though. Like you start running and you think that the escalator has to go up towards marathoning. And it's like, no, the escalator needs to go wherever you want it to go. And yet that is something that I find, again, really, really fascinating of, okay, how do we break this thought process down? Or how do we break like these entry points into the sport so that people know that there is no entry point, right? Your entry point is the sneakers on your feet and either the treadmill you get on or the door you walk out of. Right? Like that, the entry point is that starting. So I just love that, changing that stigma, changing our perception of what running is and who running is for is so important. And it really does start with, people like you, people like me that do have some kind of platform to be like, hey, if you just want to run around your block, you're a runner, and that's good. If you want to run that ultra marathon, cool, that's just as good. But one doesn't make the other better or lesser as a runner.
Right. And I'm certainly not an elite runner by any means. And I'm also not a slow runner. I consider myself kind of in at the higher middle.
Yeah.
But I also want people to know that I take walk breaks on my runs. I, might go out and do a half marathon at a 7:45 pace, but I go out on easy runs at 11-minute paces sometimes. So I don't want people to think just because I'm doing one thing in a race, I also do this. And it's not going to make me less of a runner because I went out for 4 miles and every 10 minutes I walked for a minute.
Yeah.
So I do post my paces on Instagram, where I know some people have shied away from that, but I want people to see that variation, that yes, I can do this, and yes, I can do this. And when I do this, it doesn't make me less of a runner. So, I do think letting people know the variation in paces too, that some people do, because I do see really fast people and think, oh my God, they're so fast, so fast, so fast. Like what do they do on those other days? So I think that can help change people's perception of running as well. Just knowing that it doesn't always have to be that high speed chase all the time. You know, if you're going out and you're walking, that you're still running. You're still a runner.
Yeah. And I'm one of those people where I'm always like, do I share my paces? Do I not share my paces? And it's partly because it's like such a personal thing, where it's personal in the sense that like every day is different. So like today I had a 4-mile run. On Tuesday I had a 4-mile run. Vastly different experiences. It was the exact same run, exact same, like distance wise, it was the same. Route wise, it was the same. The way I experienced it, totally different. Tuesday, I was like, this is wonderful. Today, I was like, this is awful. And it's reflected in like the paces, it's reflected in things like the heart rate and all of that stuff. So I'm definitely one of those people that I'm like, do I want to share this? Do I not want to share this? Do I want, because that it's such a fine line of you're sharing it to show the range and to educate, and sharing it and then having people, and obviously you can't control how people receive the information,
Right.
but sharing it and then people thinking like, oh, I need to emulate what you're doing so that I can get to your level. When it's like, no, like you're sharing it so that you can see the variety, not because you want people to copy what you're doing. You're trying to, and I think that's just it. It's what you're doing is very much so normalizing every aspect of running.
Right.
And that truly is such a gift to everyone who follows you and everyone who works for you, because you're giving of yourself to try to educate.
Yeah, exactly. Normalizing is the perfect word to use for that. You know, but I've done polls in my Instagram stories before, you know, saying, should I keep posting my paces or not? And because sometimes, like you said, I'm like, I don't know, should I just keep it to myself and, you know, look up my race times, you know,
Right.
race times are online forever.
Yeah,
but,
forever.
yeah. So, but then I'm like, you know what? I feel like people should see like what I've put in to get to the point that I'm at. And it's not always about running the hard paces all the time. And so I want people to see the reality of what running looks like. And so, yeah, so I do go back and forth with, should I keep posting paces or not? But I think normalizing is the perfect word to describe what I want people to see.
Yeah. Listen, right now I'm feeling totally inspired that when I officially kick off my London Marathon training to share more. Yeah, to share more of that, because I think it ultimately comes down to just what is your intention with the share. Right. And it's, again, we can't control how other people receive it, but I'm going to assume that in your polls, people probably really want to see the paces, right?
Yes.
Like they want to see that stuff. Yeah, I figured.
Yeah.
All right. Final question is, what's going on with you? Tell us a little bit about your fashion line, how you merge that fashion what did you say? I was like, oh, it rhymes. Your passion for fashion with running. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about where we can follow you, where we can support you, where we can reach out to you. How did you come up with the brands that you came up with? What are you excited about? Just a full rundown of just all of you.
Okay. So I worked in the fashion industry for years after graduating college, and then became a stay-at-home mom when I had my first son. And so did that for many years. And like I said, when I turned 40, I started running and fell in love with it. And in 2016, after my kids were in school full time and felt like, okay, I want to go back to work, but I still want to be here for the kids, and just found this new love for running and thought, oh my God, this is like my two favorite things, like worlds colliding. I am definitely creating a running brand. And so that's how that came to fruition. I just have always loved fashion and obviously running now. So yeah, so that's how that started in 2016, and always trying to come up with new ideas and sayings for my shirts. And I try to keep all of my leggings and shorts kind of in sync with the new Pantone colors of the year, and just something fun and different. And my motto behind my brand was, I just want women to feel great about themselves when going out for a run. And just like anything, when you put on something that you feel good about yourself in, I feel like if you wear some fun running gear, it's going to make you feel good when you're running. And
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I
maybe
agree.
help you have a good workout or a race, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of how the brand came to fruition. And yeah, so right now just pumping out all the holiday orders and trying to get all of that done. And what else?
Your website is?
Yeah. So my website is stilettorunning.com, and Instagram also Stiletto Running, and Facebook at Stiletto Running. So everything's all the same. And email info@stilettorunning.com. So,
you're like,
yeah,
consistency
all
across the
across the
brand
board.
makes it easy
Yes.
for everyone to reach you.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast today and for sharing time with me. If you've got any final words to anyone who's going to listen to this podcast, feel free to share them. I put you on the spot there.
Anyone can run. And if you run, walk, you're a runner, and anyone can hire a coach. You know, you don't need to be an elite for sure.
I love that, because that really is, it's like, you're like, so not only can anyone run, but also anyone can hire a coach. And I think that is such an important reminder for everyone here, because as you said, your run coach is someone who's going to hold you accountable and also be one of your biggest cheerleaders in this journey of running. So again, Shana, thank you so much for being on
Thank
the
you.
podcast. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time.